Welcome, this is a quick tips tutorial and other shortcuts, so I hope you'll be able to use this in your own workflow and improve your speed. So first of all, we can actually pan on almost every single panel in After Effects with the middle mouse button. So let me illustrate this quite quick. I'm going to make a new composition and just a new layer. And with middle mouse button, you can see I can actually pan around the viewer, which is quite awesome. And this goes for everything. You can pan around the effects as well, as you can see here. You can even pan down here with the layers. So if we duplicate a lot of layers like this, just go full greedy banana. And now look at this, middle mouse click, and I can just drag through this entire thing. So this is really useful to quickly move around and get an overview over things. So that's quite nice. Another practical little tip is if I make a mask on a layer, I just click on the little mask icon up here, or the little mask tool, the pen tool. If I make a quick mask here, and see right now I only have one point selected, but if you double click on one of the points, it automatically selects the entire mask, which is quite nice, and puts it in transform mode, so you can rotate it, you can scale it down, you can do all manner of things with it. So that's also really practical. So another really cool thing is if you double click on the name of whatever viewer panel you have active, you can basically make it fill the entire screen, which is extremely practical. And this goes for everything. That goes for compositions, as you can see down here. So if you have a lot of layers and you want to organize it and have a better overview, you can just double click. And it's very also practical with the project manager, for example. You can see the paths, the additional video information you can see here. You can have additional comments and all kinds of crap. And this tip I also discovered way too late, but it's extremely practical. Let me just go full greedy banana here and duplicate a bunch of layers. So if you started to organize your project, with a few layers of different colors, maybe you make them blue because, okay, these are the shape colors or whatever, or maybe effect layers. And then you have to want to select all those layers to maybe offset them or do something with them. And of course you can do it manually by holding Shift Down, but that's a pain in the gluteus maximus. So instead you can right click on the label and say select label group, and every single layer with that color will be selected. So that's also extremely useful. So another little practical thing is if you hold your mouse over this timeline duration thingamabob, you can see Control click for alternate display style. And if you Control click on it, obviously, it's going to change everything to display it in frames instead of seconds or duration. And this goes even if you try to make a new composition, you can see it actually also displays it in frames. Now this is practical if you're working with someone who works in a frame-oriented workflow, like for example, someone with Nuke or Fusion. They generally work with frames and not directly duration, so that's also quite practical. So easings. If you have animated a layer, let's just animate this bad boy over here. So there are several ways that you can ease the animation between these keyframes, right? Right now it's just linearly going from one side to the other. And I can just quickly show what I mean here by just duplicating this thing. So now I'm going to duplicate this layer, I'm going to move the other layer up so you can see what I mean. Just in case you aren't familiar with easings, if I select these bottom keyframes and say easy ease, which means that it's going to ease out of this keyframe and it's going to ease into this keyframe. And I'm just going to set the endpoint here. You can see that the bottom one is starting slow and ending slow, while the top one is going at the exact same speed constantly. So we want, it's nice to have shortcuts to edit these easings. So for example, you could do like I just did now, just right click and choose easing. You can also press F9. It will automatically make them easy ease. So if we go up here to graph editor, you can see the speed of the position is being easy eased, as you might say. You can also just simply select the keyframes or select the animated property and just go into the graph editor and move them yourself, as you can see here, just to make the speed curves however you want them. But I actually like to, let me just select this, Control click on them, it will set them back to linear. I actually like to press just select keyframes and Ctrl Shift K. This will bring up the keyframe velocity, and it's exactly the same as easing. You can choose the speed of the in points and the out point and the influence of that keyframe in the in and the out point. So if I say speed 0 and then influence 80, speed 0, influence 80, now you can see it's going to have this really slow out and really slow in animation. and you can also see it in the graph editor. It's quite dramatic. That's what I usually use to change the easings. So another practical thing is if we have a bunch of layers, let me just duplicate this like I just don't care. So if you have a keyboard with a numpad, you could actually quickly write the numbers of the layers you want to select. So I'm pressing 8, it's going to select 8, 15, it's going to select 15. So this is a quick way to quick select your layers. If you already know that, okay, layer 15 has all my controls or all my effects or whatever, and you can just quickly, bam, write 20, and there you go, you've selected layer 20. Very useful. So another cool shortcut that I really love is that you can actually snap a layer to the beginning or the end of a composition. So let's say this layer is like all the way someplace, maybe you have a huge composition and it's outside of your timeline view and you have a hard time finding it. You can hold Alt down and press Home, and it will snap to the beginning of your composition, which is extremely useful. You can do the inverse. If you hold Alt down and press End, it will snap to the end of the composition, as you can see here. So that's extremely useful. Another cool shortcut that I really love is that you can offset layers in time by holding Alt button down and pressing Page down or Page up. So you can quickly select several layers and just offset them frame by frame. If you hold down Shift and Alt, you move them or offset them by 10 frames at a time, which is also very useful. Another useful shortcut is I and O. So if you select a layer and press I, it's going to snap the time indicator to the beginning of that layer. And if you press O, it's going to snap it to the end of that layer. Another cool shortcut is if you have a layer selected or layers selected and you hold Ctrl and Alt down and then you press the key up or key down button, you can move those layers up or down in the order, which is also very useful. You can even keep selecting more layers by holding Ctrl Shift down, and see now I can select layers up and down at the same time that I want to move. So I can start with like number 4, Ctrl Shift, press down. Now select those 2 layers. Now I'm going to press Ctrl Alt and up and then move those 2 up. So it's just a quick way of quickly moving layers around without having to click all over the place. The next tip is creating your own shortcuts, because there, like for example, there are many ways to cut down or trim down a layer to this specific position. You can either just take the start and just pull it over, but again, when you have a very long composition or you want to be very precise, you don't want to have to move that every time. You can even choose the split command, Ctrl Shift D, and it will split the layer into 2, and now you can just delete the top one if you only wanted the bottom one. But I prefer to make a shortcut for it. So I press Alt I to trim the beginning of the layer to wherever my time indicator is, and Alt O to trim it to trim the end to where my indicator is. And I did that by going into Edit, Keyboard Shortcuts, and then I search for, like, say, Trim. And you can see here at the bottom, I basically just said that trim layers in, and I chose the Alt I, and trim layers out, Alt O. And you can do this with every single command that you might use a lot and that you deem practical to have a shortcut for. So go right ahead and go bananas. And last but not least, since I don't want to have to go down and either change resolution all the time or go up and find the loop, see, I could barely find it, found the loop tool. Instead, I actually click on comma and dot, because then you can zoom in and out quickly. So I use this quite a lot as well. And again, this is just a nice to have shortcut, but I also like changing resolution quickly. So if you feel like, let me just apply a fractal noise here so you can see it easy. High contrast, let me just zoom in, something like this. So if, for example, this effect was very, very heavy and I wanted it to have resolution, I could press Ctrl Shift J, and now it's half resolution, as you can see here, and Ctrl Shift Alt J to quarter resolution. So there you have it. Those are some of my most used productivity tips. And I would love to hear if you guys also have some great tips on how to improve workflow in After Effects, since even after my 10 plus years using this software, I still keep on learning new methods and new little tips and tricks here and there. So there's always something more to learn. So don't hesitate to share your best tips and tricks in the comments. Have a wonderful day with some cheese.